I wasn't the quiet child. I just learned early that no one listens when you speak from the shadows. When people talk about childhood, they usually remember birthday cakes, bedtime stories, and parents who cheered from the sidelines. I remember empty chairs. Not literally, our house was always full. For kids, constant noise. A television always humming in the background. But the space I existed in was invisible. My older brother, Mason, was the golden boy. Varsity everything, charming, tall. My younger sister, Eliza, was the angel ballet, choir, straight teeth and brighter clothes. Even our middle sibling, Nate, had his niche, video editing and endless charisma. And then there was me, the quiet one, the she's fine one. I didn't need much. Or maybe I did, but I stopped asking. Attention went to whoever demanded it loudest, and I learned young that being overlooked hurt less than being dismissed. I loved science. It started with an old chemistry set from a garage sale. The instructions were missing, so I made my own experiments. Some of them worked. Some of them stained the garage floor. I didn't care. I cared that I could make things happen, that something in the world would respond when I reached out to it. I saved up lunch money to buy notebooks, filled them with diagrams, ideas, questions. I spent hours at the library reading about chemical bonds and reactions. My notebooks became my real home, but no one noticed. Or if they did, it was with mild amusement. Look at her, still playing with her science stuff. No trophies for that. No front row seats at competitions that didn't involve cheering. Even when I won my first regional science fair, my parents didn't come. I called from the school steps, holding my plaque, my voice tight with hope. My mom said, "Oh, that's nice, honey. Sorry, we had Eliza's rehearsal." So I walked home alone, award pressed against my chest like armor. In a house full of people, I learned what loneliness really meant. And still, I kept going. Not because someone believed in me, but because I did. You can only be told no so many times before the word stops working on you. Senior year was supposed to be the one where everything changed. And in a way, it did. I'd spent the past 3 years burying myself in science fairs, independent research, and any competition I could enter with zero budget and a borrowed laptop. I saved every acceptance letter, every congratulations email. I didn't need anyone's applause, just their silence long enough for me to get through the door. When I got the letter from Ridgefield University, full tuition, research support, mentorship track, I sat alone on the porch and read it 3 times. I didn't cry. I felt taller. I went inside, letter in hand, and found my parents in the kitchen. My mother was going over Eliza's dance schedule. My father was on his second beer, watching Nate show Mason some new phone app. I got in, I said. "Ridgefield. They're covering everything." Heads turned. Briefly, my mom blinked. "Wait, where's Ridgefield again?" "In Massachusetts. It's top 10 for biochemistry." My father frowned. "Massachusetts? That's far. What about Eliza's recital in June?" "It's in August." "I wouldn't miss." "And who's paying for the rest?" He cut in. "Flights, housing, books." "I'll figure it out," I said. "But I could use help with the deposit. Just the first few things." They looked at each other, then back at me. "Look," my mom said gently, "you've always been smart. But maybe this is too much. You've never been, like Mason. Or Eliza. College is a lot. And out of state? We can't support that." They weren't angry. They weren't even dismissive. Just calm. Final. Like they'd already decided what I was allowed to want. I stood there, holding a letter that felt heavier than bricks. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit for years. They were never going to choose me. So I chose myself. I packed my things that night. Not all of them, just what I could carry. I left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'm going anyway." And then I walked out the door. Not away from home. Toward it. When no one comes to catch you, you learn how to land on your feet, even if they're shaking. I moved in with my grandmother the next day. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, in a building that smelled like old carpet and boiled vegetables. Her living room became my bedroom. A mattress on the floor, a curtain for privacy. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the first place I ever felt welcome. She didn't ask why I left. She just hugged me, then pointed to the fridge and said, "There's milk, and the cereal's on the top shelf. Don't go hungry." That was all I needed. I got a job bussing tables at a local diner 2 blocks from the community college I transferred to until I could save enough to transfer to Ridgefield. I'd take early morning shifts, classes midday, and close out the register at night. On weekends, I cleaned offices downtown. My hands stayed cracked and raw for months. School was harder than ever. Not the material, the fatigue. Staying awake in lectures after 4 hours of sleep. Choosing between eating and printing an essay. Pretending not to notice when classmates went out for coffee while I counted change for laundry. But I kept showing up. Every class. Every shift. Every lab. My grandmother didn't say much, but every evening, she'd leave a cup of tea by my notebook and say, "Don't forget to blink." It was the smallest kindness, and somehow the one that kept me upright. One professor noticed me. Dr. Myers. She saw my hunger not for food, but for knowledge. For a place to grow. She gave me access to her research assistant program. I worked evenings in her lab for credit. Sometimes just cleaning beakers. But eventually, she let me assist with small trials. Then with full experiments. She told me I had precision, and I held that word like it was a trophy. Because it came from someone who saw me not as someone else's shadow, but as my own light. You only need one door to open, as long as you're the one holding the handle. The first big shift came when Dr. Myers nominated me for a regional research grant. I almost didn't apply. I stared at the online form for days, convinced I had nothing worthy to offer. But one night, after a 10-hour shift at the diner and a pile of ungraded papers, I stayed up until 3 a.m. writing my proposal on enzymatic instability and agricultural runoff. 2 months later, I got the email. "Congratulations, you've been selected." It came with funding, lab access, a travel stipend to attend a student research conference in Boston. I printed the email and brought it to my grandmother. She smiled, wiped her hands on her apron, and said, "Told you they'd see it eventually." Boston was like stepping into another life. I stood in front of a panel of real scientists explaining my process, answering questions with the same clarity I'd used to explain to confused customers how to split a check. I was still exhausted, still wearing thrifted clothes and eating granola bars for dinner. But I didn't feel small anymore. That night, after my presentation, a professor from Ridgefield University approached me. Dr. Tamara Liu. She said she'd sat in on my talk by chance and was impressed. We had coffee the next morning. She asked about my coursework, my goals, and how I'd built my project on a budget so tight it squeaked. I was honest. She listened. Really listened. By the end of the meeting, she said, "If you're willing to transfer mid-year, I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to Ridgefield's undergrad research program. We'll cover housing too." I sat still for a full minute, blinking back tears I didn't even realize were there. Not because it was finally happening, but because I'd stopped expecting it could. When I got back to my grandmother's apartment, I told her I'd be moving in January. She hugged me tight and said, "Don't forget where you started, but never let it slow you down." And I didn't. When you spent your life in silence, the sound of your name being recognized is almost too loud to believe. Ridgefield felt like another planet. Bright hallways, pristine labs, professors who had published books I used to check out from the library. At first, I kept my head down, convinced someone would realize I didn't belong. But they didn't. Because I did. Within a month, I was offered a paid position in a leading environmental chemistry lab. I shadowed postdocs, co-authored reports, and spent evenings running late-stage experiments on microtoxin filtration. I'd never felt more alive. By the end of my second semester, I had 2 published abstracts, 3 academic awards, and a summer internship lined up with a major research center in New York. But it wasn't until the local station ran a short feature on student researchers that everything really changed. I almost didn't show up for the interview. I wasn't good at cameras. But they wanted to highlight underrepresented voices in science, and Dr. Liu pushed me gently. "You don't realize how many people need to hear your story," she said. So I did it. 10 minutes. One take. I spoke about my journey, about growing up feeling invisible, about the way one professor changed everything just by saying, "I see you." The segment aired on a quiet Tuesday evening. By Thursday, my inbox had hundreds of messages, strangers, students, aspiring scientists. People who saw a piece of themselves in the girl who used to scrape quarters together for bus fare and now worked under microscopes worth more than her old apartment. But there was one message that made me stop breathing for a moment. It was from my mother. "Saw you on TV. Everyone's so proud of you. Let's talk." Then one from Eliza. "Hey, just wanted to say congrats. We should catch up." And another from my father. "We always knew you'd do well. Call when you can. We could use some help." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Not from joy, but from something colder, something quieter. The realization that now that I'd become someone, they remembered I existed. When the people who forgot you come asking for help, the hardest part isn't saying no, it's meaning it. They didn't just text. They showed up. I came back to campus one evening to find them waiting outside my building, my father leaning against the hood of a car, arms crossed like this was some normal visit. My mother clutching a coffee she probably hadn't sipped once. Eliza was in the back seat, pretending not to look at me. I wanted to walk past them, but I didn't. I sat across from them at a diner nearby. The same kind of place I used to clean floors for tips. The small talk didn't last long. They wanted money. Not directly, of course, not at first. It was debts. A bad investment. Your father made some mistakes, my mother said. We didn't want to burden you while you were busy with school. As if they'd ever worried about burdening me before. They talked about family sticking together and how we're so proud of everything you've done. My father called me a role model, the same man who once said I'd never last a semester. Then came the ask. They needed a loan. Not huge, just something to get back on track. And if I helped, it would show I'd really grown up, part of the team now. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said this. You never saw me until someone else did. You never believed in me until you needed something from me. And I didn't get here with your help. I got here in spite of your absence. They tried to object. My mother wiped her eyes, and my father said I was being dramatic. Eliza stayed silent. But I wasn't dramatic. I was clear. I told them I wouldn't be giving them money. I didn't owe them for the years they chose to look past me. I didn't owe them comfort now that I'd finally found my own. I paid the check and walked out. They didn't follow. And for the first time in my life, that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like closure. Some victories aren't loud. They're just finally living a life you don't have to explain. My home isn't big, but it's mine. Books on every shelf, windows that catch the sunrise, a kettle that whistles when I forget I put it on. I still work too late and drink too much coffee, but the pressure isn't survival anymore. It's purpose. I split my time between the lab and mentoring students like me, the overlooked ones, the quiet ones, the kids people underestimate until they prove impossible to ignore. Dr. Myers and Dr. Lou still check in. My grandmother passed a few months ago, peacefully, in her sleep, after telling me for the 10th time that week that she was proud of me. I keep her photo by my desk. There are friends now. Real ones. A partner who listens when I talk about chemical structures like they're poetry. People who don't need me to earn my place in the room. They just leave the chair open. Sometimes I think about that day in the diner. About my parents. I don't hate them. I don't wish them harm. But I don't let them back in, either. Forgiveness doesn't require reunion. It just requires release. One night, I was invited back to Ridgefield as a guest speaker. I stood at the same podium where I once sat quietly in the back, afraid to raise my hand. Now, the room leaned in to hear what I had to say. At the end of the talk, a girl in the front row asked me what advice I'd give someone who feels invisible. I thought about it. Then I said, your worth doesn't need a spotlight to exist. Build it anyway. Build it so well that even the dark can't ignore it. That's how I live now. Not to prove anything. Not to make anyone regret. But to build something so strong, so honest, so completely mine. That I never again question whether I deserve to be seen. Because I do. I always did.